What is the point of doing daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly notes? I would even throw in decade notes in there. And so, this idea of periodic notes, if you're used to Obsidian, or shout out to the Journals plugin, by the way, or if you use Noteplan, or even just like Logseq, there's all these different tools that make it a lot easier for you. Ignore the messy hair day today because I really wanted to talk about these notes because I'm struggling with them. And I'm sure you probably are too. Because, first off, it's already kind of hard to develop a habit to start journaling every single day. And so, being able to make your daily notes is already a challenge on itself. And what do you put in there, what do you want to put in there, and really, like, what do you need to put in there? I'm just going to ignore it. The point is, the daily notes are already something that's very common. Most PKM tools have some sort of way of doing daily notes. Even in Notion, you can do a database for Pete's sakes, and capacities and Acrium work around daily notes no less. I can't wait for capacities to be local because having the daily notes on the web browser just didn't work for me. Now, when it comes to the more higher abstraction notes, that's why I wanted to make this video because I don't think enough people talk about what these notes are for. And so, this idea of weekly notes is pretty simple in that regard. It's just planning the week ahead, really. Like, what are you going to do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, blah, 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 blah. You might not even do the weekly note until Sunday evening or something like that. And really, that kind of becomes your daily note too. Like, are you going to do a daily note and a weekly note? Maybe, probably. It's just one of those things where now it starts to get a little convoluted how you're doing two notes in one day. It's kind of like, ugh. But then we get to the monthly note. And this is where I do it actually completely different to most people. I do a public monthly note. It's called the Now Page Vlog. I got that idea from Derek Severs. Every month, he updates a page on his website called the Now page, where you're updating the professional and personal sides of your life publicly. So if people want to know what you're doing, you can just go check it out. And so, man, this is really bugging me. And so, this idea of being able to talk about what you're doing publicly, I think is really helpful. And I didn't really quite realize that's what I was doing was a monthly note, just publicly. It became a series, a blog post series that I also did a vlog for because why not, right? And so every month I do that. And I think that's a very healthy way of kind of structuring the monthly note, really, too. Like, here's what's going on publicly, like professionally and personally in my life. The next is where it starts to get a little bit more different, too. When you get to the quarterly and yearly layers, this is where a lot of people start doing alignment or reviews and trying to think big picture. So you go from the daily down in the micro up to the yearly in the macro. And so that's why I have the Supra kind of naming convention on the PIOS. But the idea of quarterly notes I see as this alignment. Every quarter, you're just checking, are your actions following your values, virtues, and rituals that you want to be known for, that you see yourself as? And so I really kind of go hard into the four pillars philosophy and Ikigai as the two main things for the quarterly alignment. And so each quarter you can kind of decide what kind of things are you going to do for your mind pillar. Are you going to change your workout regimen? Are you going to start meditating more for longer perhaps? And you can really work on your habits because it takes at least 21 days to do a habit in the first place and get going into it. And really that study has been kind of iffy when it comes to that proven. And it is proven, but it's also kind of like, there's other scenarios where habits can be formed by the systems too. And so you really need to think bigger than a month to really form habits, is what I'm trying to say. And so you really need to think about, okay, body, mind, spirit, and emotions. These are all areas that take time to develop. It's going to take more than a month to really make any progress on any of them, anyways. This is the layer that you're going to focus on. Ikigai being your reason for being. Are you pursuing the thing that's really driving you forward in life? And I don't even necessarily just mean professional career. I mean, just really what your magnum opus is. Like, are you working towards that? And then finally, you have the yearly layer. I shouldn't say finally, because I will mention the decade one too. Finally, you have the yearly layer where you have a review of what happened and a preview of the next year ahead. The review is really helpful because you can figure out what did you do right, what did you do wrong, what do you need to do next, what did you miss out on doing that you need to do now in the future. And for example, in 2023, I went into it thinking, hey, I want to do three things, right? I want to do the gaming channel, the Poly Tools channel, and really kind of the swimming. PolyInnovator was kind of like another thing on top of it, but like the swimming book was a big thing for me that I wanted to get done. And while I didn't get it done, I made a lot of progress over this past year to get toward it. I was hoping to get it done this year too. Now 2024 is basically done and I haven't got it done yet. Oh well. But in 2023, that was the goal. Doing three different things. And what ended up happening was, man, it's kind of crazy to think about how the year is already by, but I digress. The thing what happened was the first month of 2023, I spent it pursuing knowledge in AI. Like I just dove right into it, started building my video game that I wanted to make, and now it's basically 2 years away into after doing that, which is kind of frustrating. Haven't made much progress on the video game either. But the point is, I spent the whole month working with AI and trying to build a game and focusing on that endeavor. And then later on that year in September, I got severely deathly ill. Got Legionella, and so I was sick for the entire month of September. It was brutal. But then that's 2 months that I was just out of commission when it came to my goals. And then throughout the year, I was also moving productivity tools. I started out in Notion, then I moved to Obsidian, then I moved to Capacities, then I moved to Acrium, and then eventually, I think this year, but maybe kind of leading into it, I moved into Obsidian again. And now I've been there ever since. But I basically had spent a whole bunch of time moving between these tools, especially since none of them really have a good export function. That's why Markdown is so nice with Obsidian, because at least then it's kind of at least a little bit more agnostic between tools. But like Notion made it really hard to export out of things. Anytype made it really hard to import anything into it. Capacities was all by hand. It was a horrible user experience trying to copy and paste things in and out of it, like both in and out. It was terrible. I need to remember that actually when I think about going back to Capacities. It was a really horrible experience. But basically, I moved between all those tools by hand. My point being is that it took basically about a month over the course of the year moving between these tools that I was no longer working on projects. So that's 3 months. That's a fourth of the year that I was not able to pursue my goals, which is probably why I didn't work much on the game or even the gaming channel in general. It wasn't until this year where I actually made a decent amount of progress on the gaming channel. And so, really, I lost a whole fourth of the year, a whole quarter of the year. And I didn't really necessarily was able to plan that out, right? And so whenever it came to the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024, I still kind of had to play catch up based on some of the stuff that I missed out on last year. And now that I finally had Obsidian and settled into Obsidian, I had to figure out a way to manage my content planning. And I've been trying to do that all year. I eventually kind of have just resettled back onto the Kanban plugin, but how do I use it effectively, especially when it comes to a content blitz that I'm doing now across my channels? And this idea of planning out ahead was the review. And now we're approaching the end of 2024, and so I'm going to be doing the yearly review once again. So this is the idea that I wanted to share with you, is that really each layer has its own place. And when people often talk about the yearly notes, they kind of think of it as just one note, but it should be two. It should be a review and preview, or like two halves of the same one. I know Ali Abdal kind of talks about this a little bit. And then we had the decade notes, right? Every decade, we're a different person. Every year, technically, we're a different person, but decade especially, I'm completely different than when I was at 19 years old. And so it's kind of fascinating to think about. I worked in a swimming pool for over a decade. And this idea that, like, that's who I am, sure, but is it going to be who I am the next decade? Probably not. So, who am I going to be the next decade? And so, I think decade notes are very important for one reason in particular. If you ever wanted to do an autobiography when you're old, looking back, that'll make things a lot easier. Sure, doing weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly notes will definitely help as well. But I think that taking a moment every decade to really narrow down, like, what did you do that year, and or that those 10 years, I think that's very fascinating that no one ever talks about. And so really there's not much to really say besides that I just want you to think about the yearly, the quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily notes and how they're different than what most PKM people are talking about.